This is a podcast of 98FM's Dublin Talks. Remember, catch the show live Monday to Friday at 10 a.m.
98FM's Dublin Talks with Adrian Kennedy.
98FM.
Natalie, you're on 98FM. Hiya, Natalie.
Hiya, how are you?
Good, thanks, Natalie. What do you want to say?
I just wanted to actually say that I'm actually very impressed at what Malachy has to say. He's actually quite well informed, and it's quite refreshing to actually hear somebody with an opinion that just seems to be just not driven by the media, you know. I feel like a lot of this kind of coincides with things that is happening in different countries, such as America and stuff like that, where there is a push to have heavily armed police, and obviously for our own country, Garda, but then to have the people, to push away from the people's rights to be armed themselves. So it's just interesting to see the pattern of events that are happening.
And you agree with what Malachy is saying, and one of the things is our police force on Garda Síochána can't be trusted.
Yes, absolutely.
Really? You don't trust them at all?
Not at all. Absolutely not. I mean, I think on a whole, I'm not saying that individually. I mean, it's a ridiculous statement to make, to say that every single guard out there can't be trusted. But unfortunately, we live in a society that is, it comes from the top as well. And I think that's, the most important part, to say that it's not out to slander every single guard. I mean, I have a lot of respect for people that step into that role. It's very impressive. But nonetheless, you still have to look at this that aren't driven by the media. And what happens is, around a story like this, when it comes about, and it is a very unfortunate circumstance that a Garda will be attacked. It's absolutely disgusting. There's no need for it.
And it really is a sad state of affairs that the Gardaí have very little way of defending themselves against that.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that that's just wholly the case. I think as Malachy was stating, which is a very fair point that needs to be taken into account, this is not something that is happening every single day. Hence the reason why it's on your show today. It's being brought to the forefront because it is something that has happened, and it's going to be heavily talked about in the media, and social media is another great tool for that, and it's very much controlled. Everything like Facebook, everything is very much controlled. So what we're seeing and what's being pushed to us is an agenda, and essentially what we're doing is we're following it, and every listener that's coming on is saying the same things. Absolutely, I think the Garda should be armed, but perhaps maybe they need to think about what that actually might mean, what it might mean for us as, like as Malachy was saying, it's, they were supposed to be people of the peace. I mean, I don't feel like that one is a Garda presence, do you?
It depends on the circumstances, but yeah, sometimes, yeah.
Well, I don't think it should depend on the circumstance. I think that they should uphold their end of what they've signed the oath for. And I think that that's the main thing to say. That, I mean, even if I'm like,
But are we not really treating our police in a disgraceful way, sending them into situations where they can be attacked like this, as the Garda Representative Association describes, they're punch bags for society? That's an awful way to send somebody out to do their job without any way of defending him or herself.
But of course you're going to hear as I said, that is what's being pushed. That line is going to be pushed, and you're going to hear that same line over and over again, the media repeated, so that it gets into our head that we assume that the Garda are always in danger, which is not correct. The Garda are not always in danger. And what happened was, as I said, it was an unfortunate circumstance, but as Malachy also pointed out, there are very few circumstances that happen like this. And when they do, there are heavily armed police, and I mean heavily armed police. And I think
but stay there for a second, Natalie. Anthony, you're on 98FM. Hi, Anthony.
How you doing?
Anthony, Natalie is saying the Gardaí can't be trusted. They should not be armed in any way.
I think the past three callers there have made quite a number of valid points, and I agree with them to a point, but I'd agree with them by saying that I don't think the Gardaí should be armed, as in they shouldn't be given firearms. The rank and file Gardaí should not be given firearms.
Okay, but what about a non-lethal taser gun?
But in terms of non-lethal capacity, I think Gardaí should be given the capability of having tasers. A taser, in the description, it's non-lethal. And I understand, like one of your callers, Malachy, was saying that there was heavily armed guards arriving within a couple of minutes. And that's all well.
No, sorry, he assumed it was heavy. He doesn't know that for a fact.
Okay, well, we'll say there was backup. There was additional Gardaí within a couple of minutes.
Sure, it was too late for these poor Gardaí at that stage.
And it was a little bit too late for them, unfortunately, in this case, yes. But what if that incident had taken place in my local town in Newbridge, and the nearest Garda car was in Naas, or out past the Curragh, and those guards were waiting for 5, 10, 15 minutes. The use of a taser can suddenly neutralise that situation, and then all of a sudden the backup isn't required as immediately. A guard's life at the end of the day is what is more important than people's feelings. I mean, like, this is coming from actually an ex-member. I used to serve myself, and having been assaulted several times myself, I know that it happens not on a rare occasion, but I would bet my
how often
that it happens.
How often during your Garda career would it have happened to you?
It happened. Well, I was a member for about 3 years. I was assaulted probably about 5 or 6 times.
5 or 6 times in 3 years?
Yes.
And what was the most serious assault in that 3 years?
I got a rock to the side of the face thrown by an 8-year-old.
Wow. By an 8-year-old?
I had people come at me with their fists. Drunken soldiers come at me with their fists. I had to break up bar brawls. I had to deal with people coming at me with golf clubs, with machetes.
Tell me about what happened.
The general public do not realise that on a daily basis, on a weekend basis, Gardaí are being assaulted. Yes, in this case it was reported by the media, but it happens every single week that it does not get reported. And I think Gardaí need to be given the opportunity to defend themselves as well. They have a baton and they have their pepper spray now as well that the GRA eventually provided. But those two methods, the assailant has to be basically within striking distance. With a taser, the guard is provided that extra distance from the assailant, so they can actually safely put that person on the ground from a safe distance, and they're not themselves in harm's way. If they want to utilize their baton or the pepper spray, they have to be in harm's way.
When you hear people like Natalie or Malachy saying that the police service here in Ireland, in the south, cannot be trusted,
I completely understand that way of thinking as well. From what the media has been telling us over the past number of years, what the commissions have been telling us, what the reports have been telling us, it does appear that way as well. But you have to understand as well, that's not every single guard on the street. It's not every single sergeant in charge of every single station. A lot of that rubbish is kind of coming from middle management, upper management, all these things about the breathalyzer thing, the breathalyzer numbers. That was coming from the middle management. That wasn't coming from your guard on the ground. Those numbers were basically been falsified
from a higher up.
Say, well, look at us, aren't we great? We've done all these. We've done so and so amount of breathalyzer tests.
Anthony, I just want to go back for 1 second and rewind a little bit and go back to that story you were telling me about being hit in the face with a rock thrown by an 8-year-old. What were the circumstances of that?
We were recovering a stolen car, and we were all waiting around for the pickup for the car, and a rock came over a wall, and I was standing in the wrong spot.
Wow. Okay. And do you mind me asking, did you enjoy your time serving as a guard, or?
For the most part, I did, but I got out when I knew that the time was up.
That it wasn't for you.
Well, it wasn't for me. The conditions were deteriorating quite rapidly, and I'm actually very glad I got out. A number of my friends are still in, and they're not enjoying it. They're in a job where the people who they are sworn to protect and sworn to help and sworn to end hate them. And I think any of your listeners listening to that statement should stop and realise that the next guard they meet is sworn to defend them. And maybe, just maybe, that warrants a small bit of respect. Because at the moment,
Natalie, what would you say to all that? That we should, the first person or the first people you will call if your house gets broken into, or if you're in some sort of danger, is the Gardaí, and we should have a bit more respect for them.
I don't disagree at all. I mean, look, I'm a woman of peace myself. I'm all for respect. This is not, and I think this is easily going to be misconstrued into saying, that I don't have respect for the Gardaí and that I have complete, lack of trust for every single Garda member I meet, and that's just complete and utter bull. I mean, it's not the case at all. I totally understand where your other listener is coming from. It makes perfect sense. Unfortunately, I think my point is that this is agenda that's coming from higher up. It's not. I don't disagree. I mean, nobody should feel like they have no power in a situation where they've like they said, they've been sworn in to protect people, and they've been put in a situation where they're put in danger or harm's way, and they might have a family sitting at home that's worrying about them coming home every evening. I mean, that's disgraceful. But I think not to stray away from that and not to be kind of heartless. But the bottom line to my point is that this agenda is coming from a higher place. This is not just on the ground.
I know, but again, we have the everyday Garda on the street that is being sent out in a very vulnerable way. Listen to what Anthony said. In 3 years in the force, he was assaulted several times. In 3 years.
I'm honestly not surprised. I mean, you think
isn't that ridiculous?
It's absolutely ridiculous, but let's be honest. I mean, he wasn't working in a supermarket. If he was to be...
No, I understand that. But, sorry, Anthony, do you believe... Let's look at the assaults that you personally suffered from. Would a taser gun have helped you in any of those situations?
Absolutely. If I had a taser for 3 of the occasions...
It would have prevented it.
The incident would have been stopped immediately.
I mean, Natalie...
When somebody has a taser pointed at them and they're coming at you with a golf club, what are they going to do? Are they going to keep coming at you? If they do, they're going to get tasered. Or if they stop coming at you, well, then they won't get tasered.
I mean, okay, listen to that, Natalie. 3 of the assaults would have been prevented had he had a taser to keep the attacker away.
Yeah, and I suppose what we're doing now is we're having preferable statistics. So you're asking me questions that require an answer that only requires me to answer yes in that circumstance. But let's take a different circumstance, which I've noticed no listeners have brought up or brought about. I don't know if there's anybody out there who has maybe young teenagers who have been targeted in a way that they don't deserve. Now, this is the other side.
And I agree with you on that point as well. But a guard isn't just going to whip out a taser gun for fun.
On the contrary, have you ever yourself? And this is something that needs to be talked about as well, because if we're going to talk about the other side about police protection, let's talk about citizens protection. So we'll talk about any circumstance. Have you ever heard of a circumstance yourself personally where somebody, whether it be a young individual, an adolescent, whatever it is, an adult, gets into a situation where the Garda have abused their own power or misconstrued a situation, and the result of that is quite catastrophic?
Yes, yes is the answer to your question, yes.
Okay, so the problem with that is that that's not highlighted. We're not here to talk about that.
No, we actually do highlight it quite regularly on this show, to be honest. I have to cut across to you, Natalie, because I'm way out of time on this. Mark, very quickly, what do you want to say?
Yes, Adrian, I think they should be equipped with tasers there, When they're put in a violent situation like that, people say, like when they say no, they shouldn't be. It's only if they were put in a situation like that and they'd no way to defend themselves, they'd be the first to cry out, we need tasers,
So,
I mean, people say, the guards are you'll always get like a bad egg every bunch, and they'd be the forced to draw the tasers without, thinking about the situation or whatever, But I mean, if they were, people say, like in England, like with little body cams or little recorders or something like that, and every time they have to issue the taser there, it's recorded anyway for their own safety, and the public safety as well.
Yes, like I said,
so if they were using that too forceful there, they'd be brought in for investigation and situations like that.
Okay, so you would be very happy to see them with taser guns. What do the Gardaí want in their career, says this message? It's an occupational hazard. It's the nature of the job. If they want it handy, let them get a job as a bouncer in a creche, says some smart arse.
This is a podcast of 98FM's Dublin Talks. Remember, catch the show live Monday to Friday at 10 a.m.
98FM's Dublin Talks with Adrian Kennedy.
98FM.